You're listening to the Kelly Green Hour for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANY Podcast or visit us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
Pushed down for so long, let the sun be our home, and come steal your bread, keep your fighting dogs strong, fighting for morsels, killed by their morals, day after day, our family's fearful. You've asked for war, we've been pushed too far. We'll march and we'll fight.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Kelly Green Hour. As always, we want to thank the Jackdaws for bringing us in for this segment. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and joining me today is Connor Donald. Connor, my friend, how you doing?
I am doing great. We're a week closer to football, and all my buddies are doing fantasy football drafts, so they're using and abusing me for fantasy information and knowledge. So I am busy, but I love it. I love talking football, so it's all good.
Definitely. We're 18 days away from game number 1 against the Washington Redskins. Apparently, the front runner to be the starting quarterback for the Redskins, Case Keenum. I kind of feel bad for him. We all know what happened the last time he started at the link back in 2008, January of 2018, and we all know how that went down. So we can hopefully expect another performance like that out of the Eagles and out of Case Keenum. But as always, we're going to start with the preview. This is the way we're going to do today's segment. We're going to start off with the Eagles Jaguars game, kind of review of that. Then talk about the signing of Josh McCown. And then we have a little inter segment bit that we will discuss as we get about halfway through the show. And then we will finish off with the Eagles Ravens third preseason game. I'll give our preview, some players to watch and things to look out for as you watch preseason game number 3 live from Lincoln Financial Field this Thursday evening. Be on in the Philadelphia area on NBC 10, the home of preseason football here in Philadelphia. All right, Connor. As we were on our segment last week, the Eagles were playing the Jaguars, and Cody Kessler got knocked out the game. And prior to that, you had said that the Eagles didn't really need to sign another quarterback, bring another quarterback in. And I asked you, as that happened, if you still felt the same way. You did. Now it's about a week later. The Eagles did make a move, but have your thoughts changed in terms of, was it a smart move that the Eagles brought in? We don't have to discuss Josh McCown now, but was it smart by the Philadelphia Eagles to bring in another quarterback?
I'm not going to lie. I'll foreshadow a bit, but I really like the sign, and I think it has everything to do with being confident with what's behind Carson Wentz just as much as building Nate Sudfeld for the future, whether that be we re-sign him and keep him as the Nick Foles-like backup for years to come, or whether he be used as trade bait by the end of the season. But I thought the signing was great for Nate Sudfeld, and obviously for the Eagles, we can have confidence in our backup again. Despite what's coming out about Clayton Thorson, I'm still not fully sold on it, but I like the signing. I always like Josh McCown. He was a quarterback I couldn't really hate.
All right, so I will give my opinion on that when we get to that. But going back to the Eagles Jaguars, first you brought up Clayton Thorson. He looked good. He looked a lot better than he did in that week 1 game against the Tennessee Titans, but it wasn't really hard to look better. And for being kind of thrust in there in the first quarter after Cody Kessler's concussion, I give him props because he didn't waver. He went in there, executed the game plan, whatever game plan Doug Peterson had, and was able to make plays when he needed to. It wasn't the greatest throw, but had that touchdown pass to Greg Ward, who coincidentally was the emergency quarterback if anything would have happened to Clayton Thorson in that Jaguars game. But, he definitely improved and took a step forward in his progress. And I think he's at a point now where, after week 1, I thought the Eagles would be able to cut him and stash him on the practice squad. But if he continues to have performances like that, it's going to be hard for the Eagles to cut him, have him go through waivers, and then bring him back for the practice squad, because there are a lot of teams out there that, like to have young quarterbacks to try to mold. And I think Thorson probably could be that type of guy.
I agree. I mean, with some work, he definitely could be molded. It clearly shows. I mean, he's really got to work on his arm, whether that be his strength, whether that be his accuracy. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done there. But I agree. I think it would be hard to stash him at this point. But, I mean, I feel that of a lot of guys on this team right now. I feel like Howie's going to have some wheeling and dealing to do. Hopefully he can get some deals done to address the depth at other positions with some of these pieces, like a Clayton Thorson, like potentially a Boston Scott, like some of these people may not actually clear the waivers and come back as practice squad players, kind of like Braxton Miller. We waived him and he got picked up. I feel like there's a lot of players who on this team could end up like that, where you waive him and you say, let's hope he gets to a taxi squad and someone's going to grab him. So
I actually missed that. Who did Braxton Miller get picked up by?
Cleveland Browns today.
Wow. Cleveland, this would have been a great year for Cleveland to be on Hard Knocks, even though a lot of stuff's going down with Oakland. But Cleveland's definitely got a squad over there, and I think that's a good spot for Braxton Miller. I was coming into camp, I was high on Braxton Miller, but he just wasn't able. The Eagles have you mentioned it. They have a lot of depth at a lot of positions, and wide receiver is one of them. Like, we know who the top four are. We know it's Alshon, Deshaun, Nelson, and Ortega-Whiteside. Beyond that, Mac Hollins is in there. Agadosi was having a pretty good camp. Mark Michel's had a big game against the Titans.
Mac Hollins apparently showed up a little bit more against the Ravens. Iffy. Mixed reviews, but the good was really good apparently. So
yeah, and the thing with Mac Hollins is he's a really good special teams player, and they drafted him in the 4th round. And usually when you spend a relatively high draft pick on him, you kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt and bring him back. And even though he missed the entire year last year, if he's going, the Eagles special teams really lacked last year. They usually have one of the top special teams in the league, but last year it wasn't up there. It wasn't up to par. And, if he's somebody that can help out on special teams, he's going to make the team. There are a bunch of guys on this team, or there are a couple guys that, might be better, but if they can't help out on special teams, you might not make the team, because make it, at the bottom half of the roster, if you want to make an NFL team, you have to excel in special teams. And that's something that Mac Hollins can do.
Absolutely. We do have a fair amount of special team guys, I think, this year. I mean, like LJ Fort was another person we acquired who can definitely add to that. So, I mean, I'm not worrying so much about the special teams, but that's also because I'm super confident in the offense and defense that won't have to lean on the special teams too much. So that would be the hope. But, I mean, we've had years where we've had good defense or we've had good offense, and leaning on that special teams was just that added bonus. So
what were your impressions of Clayton Thorson in the game against the Jaguars? Like I mentioned, he had the touchdown pass to Greg Ward. It wasn't the best throw in the world, but he made the pass. He completed the pass. He came into the game and kept his composure, didn't rush things. And also, Cody Kessler was that. Doug Peterson said it was his fault. It wasn't Dillard's fault. He's got to be able to read that, especially for a quarterback that has been in the league for a couple years. That's a play that he has to change up the protection, slide the line left, find your hot read, get rid of the ball. What do you think Kessler was seeing on that play?
I wish I could tell you. I honestly wish I could. On the initial replay and in general, I think Dillard just missed his assignment. But, I mean, when you dig deeper and you look deeper, maybe it was a play where it was supposed to be everyone was going right and Kessler just didn't even realize it. And then that guy came in from the left like that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, you look at replays and it doesn't look good on either Dillard or Kessler. Kessler tries to get the ball away. Doesn't even move. It feels like he just kind of stood there and boom, like he didn't even notice that guy coming. Like he could have at least got the ball away. He could have done some, maybe tried to scramble a bit so he gets the leg instead of the entire body. and takes him down and concusses him. But Dillard, I mean, you look at some replays of that, and it looks like Dillard was lost on that play just as much as Kessler probably was lost on that play. But, I mean, that's more than likely just a sign that we don't need Kessler. We don't want Kessler. He can't even run an offense at the line, and let alone know what's happening around him and have eyes all around like Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I disagree with you in terms of the Dillard point. The entire offensive line went right. So that's a play, or that's a guy that Kessler has to see. Even Doug Peterson said it after the game. He said that was on Kessler. You like Pro Football Focus, so I think it was Pro Football Focus came out with, there's been 2 offensive linemen in all of preseason who have yet to give up a rush, hurry, quarterback hit. You know who one of them is?
Andre Dillard. I've seen it.
He is a beast right now. And, he's in that position, as we mentioned time and time again, where he doesn't have to step in and play right away because you have a future Hall of Famer, ahead of you in Jason Peters. But when the time comes, and I say when because we all know that Jason Peters, he only completed 6 full games last year, so he's going to end up coming out. When the time comes for Jason Peters or for Andre Dillard to step into a game, I have 100% confidence in him being able to execute on the offensive line, pick up his blocks, contain outside rushers, pick up stunts, and, not get our franchise quarterback killed because you're protecting his blind side. We cannot afford to get Wentz hit like Kessler got hit.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, maybe it was just Kessler didn't realize the play he called. Maybe it was but at the same time, I guess for Dillard, everyone's going right. But you see that play starting out, that guy's right there. You can see that this guy's on the end and this guy's going to make a move. He's clearly not just going to stand there. So I guess even if it's just push feel, kind of push and feel and make sure that guy's not going through like he did, whatever you got to do. I mean, maybe with more experience, you might have seen Peters stick an arm out or push kind of so to kind of get him off balance a bit to avoid the situation and give Kessler an extra, that added second. But I mean, I think that just speaks to Kessler as a quarterback, like I said too. I mean, if I'm gonna put the blame prominently on a person, it's gonna be Kessler, because like you said, everyone does go right on that play, and everyone goes right, he looks right, and the one thing coming his way was left.
Yeah.
So,
and also, I was listening to, I think it was Reese on WIP during the Marks and Reese show. I'm pretty sure he said that if Dillard would have taken that end, the defensive tackle was left unblocked. So it's definitely he went for, you always want to take inside out if you're blocking somebody, take the person that can get to the quarterback quickest. So obviously that's inside out. Go for the D tackle because the D tackle is right in front of the quarterback. So I think it was just either A, it was a bad play call, or B, it was Kessler not realizing and then changing up the protection. So I don't know. It's hard to judge. It's preseason. You don't know exactly what's going on, especially when you have a bunch of young players out there. But yeah, you're right. It was on Kessler. It's an indictment on Kessler. And, we're at a point now, and when we talk about the quarterbacks in a little bit, he's probably not going to make this roster.
Oh, he definitely isn't going to make that roster. Clayton Thorson's making it hard for them to judge. Do we keep McCown? Do we how do we make this decision on? Because you can't keep 4 quarterbacks, especially with the depth we have at all the positions. That's just, not even, you can't even think about it, because that's just a waste of having 4 guys lined up and basically saying, well, we don't trust that line, and there's going to be a bunch of QBs go down.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I honestly think we're at a point we know who the quarterbacks are. It's going to be Wentz. They're paying Josh McCown a good penny. They're paying him $2 million plus
$2 million guaranteed, and
$2 million guaranteed,
up to $4.5 in incentives.
Up to $5 in incentives. So he's on the roster, and Nate Sudfeld they like a lot. He's on the roster.
They love him. So it's impossible. They're gonna go with the prayer that Thorson clears waivers and that they can mold him. But even then, there's a good chance you start molding him, people see something good or hear some good things, and I don't think he stays on the practice squad through an entire season with us.
No, because it was 2 years ago. The the Indianapolis Colts wanted to take Nate Sudfeld from the Eagles, and they had to sign him from the practice squad onto the active roster. That's
I remember that.
That's how much they like him.
Exactly. So that's why I think it's so hard to, like, people are saying Thorson's making it hard, but you already guarantee Sudfeld and Wentz, and then you basically chuck $2 million guaranteed at Josh McCown, took him away from his analyst job. So it looks like Thorson's got to be the odd man out, and at this point he's auditioning for a job elsewhere. I mean, just to speak to your first question before we went on the rant there about Kessler, I thought he looked good. I mean, you come in after your backup quarterback just got rocked and concussed. He stood in there with some confidence. He made some good plays. The offensive line looked great as soon as Kessler came out. The offensive line stood tall. I thought Jordan Mailata looked 100 times better than he did in the first game. He had some really good blocks. He picked up some plays. And I mean, I was one saying that I thought Mailata might not be on the roster. And like on my very, very initial look like 2 months ago, and now I see why they kept him. I see what they see in him. And I mean, you have to remember you're molding this guy from literally a rugby player to a guard or tackle in football. And that's no easy thing to do. So I really have to commend them on that as well. The way they've coached him up, and they've given him almost 100% of the snaps through the preseason to really prove that you want to keep me and I'm meant to be on this team, and you can trust me if someone goes down.
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, he's definitely improved, and it's again, we know the hype that he got in the preseason last year, and that died down a lot throughout the season and over this offseason. But he has looked good as the right tackle. They're at a point where they have, again, depth at another position on the offensive line, where if they need to make a move for a defensive end, for a linebacker, they're really the only two positions that they're really lacking right now, that they could possibly trade Halapoulivaati Vaitai. Somebody that's been a starter on a championship team that can play both guard and tackle, that could be a starter, for a team like the Houston Texans or a lot of other teams around the league. So, it's key to keep these guys on the field and contributing so that, the coaches and this week's, which we'll talk about later, this week's joint practice with the Ravens was, helped them out too, because you perform, you're going to do more in these practices than you're going to do in a preseason game, because rarely any of the starters have been playing for the Eagles. So you get to put the ones out there, your number one offense against the number one defense, a really good defense in the Ravens, and you get to see what you have. And you're not just doing it against your teammates, guys that their tendencies. You're doing it against somebody in a different color jersey.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. It definitely, and it's a step up from the Jags too, because I think the Jags are a team that's definitely going to regress this year. I mean, they were bad last year too.
They
were bad last year, but I mean, if anything, they're gonna just plateau. I don't think Nick Foles makes them that much, but I mean, they didn't really build the supporting cast around Nick Foles. Nick Foles loves tight ends. They didn't really address the position like they should have. Yes, I understand Josh Oliver, but I don't love him, not for starting. And same with the wide receivers. I mean, the joint practices against the Ravens and then getting a preseason game against the Ravens, I think does way more than even the first two preseason games that we had.
Yeah, definitely. Now, another aspect of the Eagles-Jaguars number 2 preseason game I want to speak on is the defense looked good. And, the leadership, I commend guys like Brandon Graham and Malcolm Jenkins. They went to Doug Peterson and said, look, I want to play. I need to go out there, get a feel for the game. And they started, and Jenkins was all over the place in the 2 or 3 series that he played. He was just, all around the ball, making tackles in the backfield, playing like the rover linebacker spot, which maybe we'll see a lot of that again. And if you keep a Jonathan Cyprien, a Trey Sullivan, they could probably get back there with Rodney McLeod, even Andrew Sendejo. So it was good. And I love the leadership that these guys have. And, just being like, look, Doug, I know you don't want to play any of the starters, but I need to get out there. I need to get into rhythm. I need to get into the game speed, even though preseason speed and regular season speed are two totally different things. But it was good to watch Malcolm Jenkins and Brandon Graham get out there and make plays.
Oh, definitely. Brandon Graham played well too. Brandon Graham was looking almost like he was in mid-season form. So clearly those guys both don't seem to have lost a step over last year, which is really exciting to think about. And I agree, you have to commend the leadership that these guys show, because there's a lot of young guys on this team. You got guys like you got Deshaun Hall, you got like some of the young safety prospects and linebackers that we're looking at, and you're saying, I'm coming out here and I'm playing with you and I'm going to work my ass off, so you better work your ass off too kind of mentality. And I like that they're not going to let these guys slow down, because if they see a lack of play by someone who might be on the roster bubble, you know that they're going to come up and they're going to say, what are you doing? You want this job? Get playing, kind of thing. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot more that they can do when they're on the field playing with the guys than just you run over to the sideline after a disappointing series and they just say, oh, good try, but you could have done this different. I feel like on the field, that leadership, really, you see it a lot more. So I definitely like that they're willing to come out and they're willing to play a couple of series. And I respect that Doug Peterson gives them that opportunity, but doesn't push it too far at the same time.
Yeah, and the thing you mentioned about Brandon Graham, last year he didn't have an offseason. He had to have foot surgery. He didn't have a preseason. He said he didn't feel right until about week 15, and he's looking, and there were a lot of people that thought he wasn't going to get a contract to come back with the Eagles. And he was healthy all offseason, got the contract, following him on Instagram, every day over the summer. And throughout the offseason, I saw videos of him at the gym for a couple hours, hours upon hours a day doing agility stuff. He's going to have that first step back, and when you get a healthy Fletcher Cox back and then Malik Jackson and then a healthy Derek Barnett, that front four is going to be ferocious. Obviously, we've talked about the depth at the defensive end position, but, a healthy Brandon Graham is going to do big things for this Eagles defense.
Definitely. And if Barnett can step up and Barnett can come back to what we know and what we saw that first year, the defensive end position might not be as weak as we think. I mean, especially like Deshaun Hall and the way he's playing and what he's putting forward. And like I've been saying when I tweet about the Eagles after the game, like if Deshaun Hall can come out during the season, and I get that this is preseason, but if he can come out and he can give you this type of quality play, even on 10% of snaps in a game, that is 10% of snaps that a Brandon Graham and a Derek Barnett can rest and prepare themselves for a long playoff run. Kind of like what we did with Fletcher Cox. I mean, you rotate him in, you rotate him out, you rotate him in all through the season, and then he just played almost 100% of snaps during the playoffs. That's what you want to be able to do. So having a guy like Deshaun Hall putting up what he's doing, as you know, I like PFF, and he's currently rated the number one defensive player, I think, of the preseason right now. That's huge. And I know that we can't take too much stock in preseason, but like I said, this guy isn't vying for a starting job. This guy's going for 10% of snaps, 15% of snaps in a game, not 50, 60, 70%. So I think it's huge to see a guy like that stepping up.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think Deshaun Hall has played himself onto the roster. He's had a really, really good.
The Joe Ostman injury probably helped, but imagine if Joe Ostman became what the Eagles say he could have been before the injury, and then you had Hall and Ostman doing this. Yeah, it would be a whole different ball game.
Yeah, it definitely would have been. And and Josh Sweat, I think he sustained an injury this week in practice. So again, we don't know what his deal is. So the depth takes, another hit if he's going to be out, which I don't think his injury's too bad, and they might just be protecting his knee, but still, again, behind Barnett and behind Graham, Deshaun Hall is going to have to step up. Sharif Miller is going to have to step up. Josh Sweat's going to have to step up. Do they give a call to a Chris Long or Connor Barwin? Who knows? But there's definitely some spots that could be won along that defensive end position for the Eagles defense.
Yeah, and you talk about reaching out. I mean, it's a shame that we haven't been able to see a whole lot of what Vinny Curry's going to bring because they haven't put him out to play. So, I mean, we have him, but what type of Vinny Curry are we getting this year? So, I mean, maybe it doesn't hurt to reach out come the end of the preseason after these couple of dress rehearsals, or maybe you do have a Vinny Curry go out for a couple series. Maybe the time then comes to consider making that call. But I mean, as of right now, I won't stress too much because obviously, like the Dallas Goedert injury, we're not going to see him again this preseason. But a lot of it's just as soon as someone tweaks something, bubble wrap them, see you in week 1.
And that's what we're doing with a lot of the starters. And I can't believe I forgot about Vinny Curry. I always forget about him. All right, so I know we briefly touched on it, but Josh McCown, you say you like it. I guess I like it. You know, he's probably the best of the quarterbacks that are out there that would accept a deal like this. Obviously, my preference would have been Colin Kaepernick, but I highly doubt he was taking a $2 million deal. But, you know, this is somebody that's been in the league for 17 years, has seen almost every type of offense. He even mentioned, he said he's seen every offense that there is in the NFL. But when he got the Eagles playbook, there was stuff he didn't see, which encourages me because we know the type of mind that Doug Peterson has. And as you mentioned, you know, he's coming in here to be the backup quarterback. They're paying him to be the backup quarterback to Carson Wentz. Now things will get interesting when we get to week 3, week 4, when Nate Sudfeld gets healthy. But, you know, if anything were to happen in the first 3-4 weeks to Wentz, I feel more comfortable with McCown back there than with a Kessler or a Thorson.
Absolutely. I mean, shameless plug here, but me and Shane talked about it on Crossing Borders. If you haven't checked it out, you should definitely check it out if you love all 4 Philly sports. But we kind of touched on the Josh McCown sign, and I kind of spoke to, I don't think anything becomes interesting or different in week 3 or 4 whenever Sudfeld's good to go. I mean, this makes it so he doesn't really have to rush if some things don't feel right, but I think Nate Sudfeld rightfully takes his spot as the number 2 quarterback, and Josh McCown is going to be there to help Nate Sudfeld with experience during practice, during games when they're on the sidelines looking at plays that happen. They're analyzing video during video when they sit down with the coach and they analyze the video from the week before. I think that McCown's going to help Sudfeld exponentially over what Clayton Thorson might have been able to do as a 3rd quarterback. I think this is good for Nate Sudfeld in that regard. And I mean, I understand that people really want a Kaepernick, and I mean, I just feel like a Kaepernick signing would have spoke to them moving on from Nate Sudfeld, and they're just so high on Nate Sudfeld that I just don't think that they'd be willing to take that risk or willing to invest that money. I mean, some reports say that Kaepernick didn't want prove-it deals. He wants like a long-term deal, and he's got a lot of football in him, so he wants to prove it by getting a good deal and going out. But I mean, at the end of this speaks to helping Sudfeld grow, and it maintains competition so Sudfeld doesn't get too comfortable, but he's got that type of guy who's going to help him improve and grow exponentially throughout this season. So, I mean, it feels like a really Nick Foles-esque type move, in my opinion.
Even when Sudfeld comes back, I think McCown, I don't know why McCown, whatever. I think he's going to be the backup quarterback. I don't think he would have ended his retirement off the cushy set at ESPN to be the 3rd string quarterback. So, and again,
I think it depends on circumstance too. I mean, if Nate Sudfeld, if they're just blowing out games and winning, you're putting Sudfeld out there and getting him the experience.
That also depends. Are you dressing 3 quarterbacks game day? Because the Eagles aren't going to dress all 3 quarterbacks on game day. They can keep Sudfeld on the active roster, but you dress 46 on game day. You dress 3 quarterbacks and, you know, not have one and not dress somebody that can help on special teams, or do you dress Wentz and McCown and dress somebody that can help out on special teams? Because if that's, I just don't see the Eagles dressing 3 quarterbacks game day when you have no need to. I'm of full belief, 100% belief that Wentz is going to stay healthy all season. He's going to start 16 games. I mean, unless he doesn't start week 17 because they already have the division wrapped up and you don't really need to beat the Giants for anything. But I don't see the Eagles on game day first 3 weeks of the season, 4 weeks, whatever, or when Sudfeld gets healthy. I don't see them dressing 3 quarterbacks.
I agree with that point. I mean, I guess at that point they have to make the decision and have the discussion with Sudfeld and McCown about where each of them stand on the roster and where each of them stand kind of as on the team. And I mean, I guess it's up for debate McCown's going into an analyst role, so maybe you do just have him on the sideline with Nate Sudfeld and hope that Carson Wentz stays healthy, and you use him as an analyst coach for Nate Sudfeld and Carson Wentz, or maybe you dress him and play him and you have Nate Sudfeld on the sideline learning for another year. But I mean, they've invested so much in Nate Sudfeld. I guess for me, it's just hard to imagine that you invest this much, you talk him up so much, and then you put him in a tracksuit for the rest of the season. But
I mean, that's how I think it's going to happen. Again, you're paying McCown like a backup. You know, you're giving him that money and pulling him out of retirement, and then come week 5, week 6, whatever it is, and if they were to dress Sudfeld over him, I just think that the only reason that McCown came out of retirement was kind of he got a backhand it or a side, look, you're the number 2. You're going to be backing up Wentz. You don't have to worry about Sudfeld dressing over. Like, that's what I think personally is happening.
I think it'll be interesting to see how they do deal with it, just because of the way they've talked about Nate Sudfeld in prior years, and then Foles emerged and led us to 2 playoff runs and stuff. So it's so interesting to think about how you deal with it, because at the end of the day, Nate Sudfeld could carry some value for you and you could move him at the end of this year. But I mean, he's also in that contract year too, if I'm not mistaken. So you have to make a decision on Nate Sudfeld as well. And then you have Josh McCown, who's just going to fold back into retirement after this year anyways. I can't imagine many more opportunities better than backing up Carson Wentz at age 42. But it's tough to say. I mean, there's a couple different things in play, I guess, when you think about Nate Sudfeld and you think about Josh McCown and who could carry more of a future for your team and who could help the future of your team, kind of thing. So,
yeah, again, I think the Eagles' backup job, though, is probably one of the better backup jobs in the league, because you get to learn from Doug Peterson, who is a top 5 coach in the league. I think he's better than Sean McVay. He's
without a doubt.
Everybody wants to call Sean McVay this genius, but what did he do in the Super Bowl against the Patriots? His offense scored 3 points. What has he done against the Eagles? The Eagles are 2-0. Doug Peterson's 2-0 against him. Everybody's talking about this McVay thing. McVay this, get the next Sean McVay. How about the next Doug Peterson? You think about McVay and it's like, look at that offense. I mean, there's games where they just put up straight duds. When they lost Todd Gurley, they were a completely different team. When they lost Cooper Kupp, they were a completely different team.
There's a couple different things like that made them a different team. Like, I mean, if it's the coach, it's the coach, not the players. Like, and it looks like this team is about the players.
Imagine
you lose key pieces, but Doug Peterson, he lost the core in Carson Wentz, and he went out there, he made that offense into Nick Foles' offense, and Nick Foles ran with it, and you could throw anyone on the field, and Nick Foles was going to make things happen.
I always say, imagine if this team and Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz had a running back like a Todd Gurley, like an Ezekiel Elliott. They're playing, like, now they have Miles Sanders, who has a chance to be a really good running back, but they weren't playing with top 5, top 10 running backs in the league. They were playing with a bunch of guys that, the Patriots didn't want LeGarrette Blount. Let's be real. They didn't want him. So he came to Philly and won a Super Bowl here. So, I just always say, give the weapons that Jared Goff has to Carson Wentz. Our receivers might be a little bit better, but like that running game that he has, and Carson Wentz, you're not having any type of debate about the type of season that Carson Wentz can lead this Eagles team to.
No, because we saw it 2 years ago, what type of season he can lead.
And that was even without a really good running back.
If you want to talk about how great of a coach Sean McVay is, I think you have to have Jared Goff go down and see what that offense can produce with Sean McVay. Because so many people say, look at his offense, look at that. he's never really had that core injury except for Todd Gurley, and then Cooper Kupp, and it completely shifted the team. So let's cut out Jared Goff for half a season and see what happens.
And the thing you're saying with Jared Goff has Sean McVay in his ear till the microphone cuts off at the 15-second mark of the play clock. Like, it's not Jared Goff that's really reading any of the defenses. It's, look, Sean McVay's in his ear saying, look, this is what you're going to do. This is what's going to happen. Bill Belichick knew that and waited until that his helmet mic or whatever headset went off and changed their defense. That's why the Patriots were able to just totally dominate the Los Angeles Rams in the Super Bowl.
That's the difference between a coach and like a quarterback, and that relationship, and that just the knowledge that a coach moves on to a quarterback. It's like Jared Goff can't learn. He needs to have McVay there all the time.
Yep.
And with Carson Wentz, that didn't happen. It didn't barely happen with Nick Foles.
Totally agree. All right. So before we get to our Eagles and Ravens preview, let's take a second or take a couple minutes, and I want you, and I'll let you go first, and then if what I'm thinking of is the same as what you have, then I'll take us something totally different.
There's lots of stories. There's a lot of
NFL storylines going out there. Not Eagles related. I want a non-Eagles related thing that from the past couple of weeks that has caught your eye. It could be fantasy football related. It could be any type of stories, and something that we can discuss for a couple minutes to kind of lighten the mood here.
Okay, I want to talk about AB because that thing blows my mind. But I'm going.
Have you watched Hard Knocks?
I have not watched Hard Knocks, unfortunately, but I've seen clips and man. But I want to talk these holdouts, because I want to talk like Zeke and Melvin Gordon for a minute. I want to get your input on that, because I mean, we look at the NBA and people are like, oh, the players rule the NBA, they rule the roost, they get what they want, they get their money. And then you look at the NFL and the opinion completely differs. So I kind of want to get your opinion on like what you think, since we do have that big labor dispute potentially coming up at the end of the 2021 season, if I'm not mistaken. 2021 season.
21, yeah.
So, I mean, I want to get your opinion. What do you think the NFL's going to do to make it so that holdouts stop? I mean, I think the one that blows my mind the most is the Zeke Elliott one. This man's got 2 years left on his contract, and he's holding out. At least do this next year, next off season. Well, you got a full 2 years left. So I kind of want to get your take.
Well, if he was smart, if he was smart, he would have waited to next year. Now that Jalen Smith got his deal, I know he went.
I think Jerry Jones is basically calling his bluff and saying, listen, Zeke, we don't need you.
Well,
we will go on without you, and I'm gonna start giving money away until.
Did you see the interview when after their game against the Rams, they were talking about Tony Pollard and about how that affects Zeke Elliott or whatever, and Jerry looked in the camera and was like, Zeke who? Now, he was joking, but Zeke and his agent did not appreciate that, and Zeke, who was on his way back to Dallas, turned his butt around and went back to Cabo. So that was not a smart thing for Jerry Jones. And look, it's not smart for his quarterback, because Dak Prescott is not a good quarterback. He is made by Zeke Elliott. I've said it for years, and I'll continue to say it, that Zeke Elliott makes Dak Prescott.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think go ahead, have a ton of confidence in Tony Pollard all you want. I mean, I'm not insanely high on the guy. I don't think he can carry the Zeke load like Jerry Jones seems to believe.
This has been all against backups that he's been doing too. It's not like he's been going up against Aaron Donald or anything like that.
Oh, exactly. Like where you have to make those big reads and stuff. But I mean, could they go without Zeke? Yes. Do they suddenly drop out of contention? I absolutely believe that they do. You go into this season without Zeke, and that completely changes the outlook of your team. You can sign Leighton Vander Esch, you can sign Jalen Smith, you can sign Dak to $40 million, whatever you may want. You can sign Cooper, but I think you take out that Zeke and the ability
they go from a 10-win team. They go from a 9-10 win team to a 6-7 win team without Zeke.
Absolutely. I
Easy.
completely agree. But I guess I want to talk Zeke. We don't want
I
to
know.
talk
All right, so
Cowboys.
to
No,
answer
I want to get
all
your
right,
take
to
with
answer
the
your
whole thing
question,
coming up. Yeah.
if the NFL needs to guarantee contracts. That's it. The NFL is the only professional sports league that does not have guaranteed contract. I mean, Kirk Cousins obviously structured his contract so it's fully guaranteed. But the whole thing that went down in 2004, 2005 with T.O., if he had a fully guaranteed contract, that would have never happened. So the NFLPA needs to find a way to get fully guaranteed contracts, to get fully guaranteed health insurance after you retire, because we all know what football does to the body. And that's the way that if the NFL wants to avoid these holdouts and wants to avoid a bunch of stuff, guarantee contracts. I think it's as easy as that.
I absolutely agree. I mean, at the end of the day, these guys just want to make sure that they're getting their money, because if you have $10 million guaranteed and you go down, you tear your ACL and you never come back right again from that, I mean, you may never, like, you can live off your endorsements or try to live off your endorsements, but you may never be able to. You may never be able to continue with the lifestyle you want to have. You may never be able to support your family like you want to be able to support your family. So I completely agree that they just need to fully guarantee the contracts up front and center. You spread it across each year and they get paid up until the final year of that contract. And then they get they want their insurance after. So, because you just don't know, like, a lot of the stuff that happens with these football players, like the brain situation, you don't realize it until after you've retired, 10 years, 15 years gone, and you're starting to your brain's starting to not be your brain anymore. And I think that's a situation that a lot of these players are running into. You can't live off endorsements forever like this, especially if you're paying insane amounts for pills or medications or stuff like that. Like, think about Todd Gurley and the arthritis in the knee. That's for life. That's there for life. Todd Gurley may have trouble walking when he's 60. He may not be able to walk when he's 60 because of that. And the NFL is basically saying best of luck to you.
Yeah,
and leaving them out to dry.
Exactly. And a lot of players don't get to retire on their own terms. Like, not everybody can be Barry Sanders, just walk away. Not everybody can be Calvin Johnson and just walk away. Like, of course, the coincidence between them two is they were both with the Detroit Lions, and that could be a part of it. But still, like, you want to be able to live your life and not have those concerns that, something could go haywire with you after you play. The story I wanted to quickly touch on, you brought him up, AB. I've been watching Hard Knocks. This dude is crazy. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have to be sitting back smiling that they got rid of him and got rid of this nuisance that he is. I mean, John Gruden is doing his best. John Gruden has supported AB 100%, but Mike Mayock, he's had enough of him. Mike Mayock's like, look, he's either all in or he's all out. Just find a helmet. I kind of get where AB's coming from in terms of helmet. Like, I play football. I'm a lineman, so it's different. But, like, there are a lot of helmets that are really uncomfortable. So I get, like, if he's worn the same type of helmet his entire playing life, that's what he feels comfortable with. And the fact that Shoot or whoever doesn't make it still is kind of weird. But, I give AB credit for standing on his morals. That's what in the last episode of Hard Knocks, John Gruden said that, like, he's standing up for what he believes in. So I kind of give him credit on that, but boy, is this guy crazy. He's crazy talented. He's a really good player, obviously.
Absolutely.
One of the best receivers of all time in NFL. But man, if he doesn't get his way, and he just he doesn't get his way, and he just throws a temper tantrum,
a toddler throwing a tantrum is exactly what AB is. I mean, at the end of the day, I agree. Like, they gave them, he wants another grace period. They gave them a year grace period. And a lot of people are saying, like, you probably could have customized a helmet that the NFL would have looked at and maybe potentially approved. And you had a whole year to do it. And instead you spent the whole year harassing the shit out of the Pittsburgh Steelers and making life miserable for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now you want another grace period when you're already making life miserable in hell for the Oakland Raiders. Like, I I've never been a big sports guy. The only sport I ever really played was basketball. So, I mean, whatever you put on shorts, find one that fits, But, like, in that situation, I mean, I guess I kind of get it. I like that he's standing up for his morals, but like I've heard some other people talk about is basically no one else is doing it. Nobody else is standing up for it for a reason. This isn't like the Colin Kaepernick situation. There's like 40 or 50 approved helmets, and a lot of people complained. A lot of people had a hard time adjusting. You adjust because it's not going to change.
Yeah, Tom Brady has said he hates his new helmet. I mean, he
wears
it.
Drew Brees said it too. I think it was one of them said it. They feel like an astronaut. I think it was Drew Brees. So, I mean, everyone has to adjust to it.
My thing is, so my helmet costs like $300. These helmets, they aren't cheap. Like, you're multi-millionaires. Go to whatever company makes the helmet you like and be like, customize me a helmet. Here's my head. Measure it. Let's do like. It makes no sense that they can't just, like you just mentioned, customize a helmet. You're a multi-millionaire. This is a multi-billion-dollar company, the NFL is, and you can't find a helmet this guy likes to wear. That boggles my mind. It makes no sense.
Absolutely. I agree. It's a crazy story. I feel bad for the Raiders. I own them in a dynasty fantasy league. So I'm just sitting there and I'm like, man, just please go play. Please.
All right, so that was good. That's something that we might we're definitely going to bring back. Find a story from the previous week in the NFL. Let's run with it. So we had a couple good ones. All right, so let's move on to the Eagles Ravens. Usually the third preseason game is the most important one where you see the starters most of the time, but I highly doubt we're going to see many of the Eagles offensive starters. Definitely, you might see a couple of defensive starters, but they got a really good practice in this week against the Ravens. Again, I mentioned earlier that the Ravens are one of the top defenses in the NFL, and they have a quarterback who Shane wasn't high on. I was really high on Lamar Jackson, and I think he has a chance to be a really good quarterback. He obviously is elite running the football, still needs to work on passing, but he's definitely a quarterback that's going to pose, if he plays on Thursday, pose issues for the Eagles defensively. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles-Ravens game? Some players to watch, and if you have any thoughts on the joint practices.
Well, I loved what came out today. Earl Thomas's comments on the offense and Carson Wentz, saying that Wentz is in a very small elite pool and with some really good company. I mean, that has to make every Eagles fan feel good that a guy like Earl Thomas, in some of the DBs from the Ravens, are making those comments about Wentz specifically, but they mention the offense and the type of players that we have on the offense. So that makes me feel really good. Definitely. I also read that Derek Barnett was working on inside pass rushing moves, which is awesome too, because apparently he got a couple really good spins in on a guy whose name slips my mind because he's not going to be on the Ravens, but let's not look at that part of it. I mean, there's a lot of things to get excited for. This team is realizing their weak points, or the players are realizing their weak points. They're improving on those weak points, and they're just going to come out and I'm hoping just be an all-around better team at the end of it. So I think the joint practices definitely help with that, where you don't have to work on that spin move against the same offensive lineman or same two offensive linemen, like you said earlier, alluded to earlier. You get to try it out on a couple Ravens offensive linemen and see how it works. And apparently for Barnett, it's working pretty well. For Pete's positions I'm looking at, I'm really looking for the linebackers to step up. It seems like the biggest guy to step up is Singleton. He is putting on a clinic out there. Edwards is looking pretty good, but given how open the field is, and Bradham saying today that he may not be ready for week one, I feel like they've kind of underwhelmed in the preseason. I mean, Singleton hasn't. Edwards is doing well for an undrafted free agent, but I feel like those other ones have kind of underwhelmed, and I'd really like to get a better look at that group, given the circumstances around Bradham and Camus Grugier-Hill. We're already down two linebackers for how long? We don't know the exact time period. So these guys got to step up and they got to show what they got. And then Hall in the defensive end depth, I watch that every single week. I want to see continued showing of consistency and reliability as rotational ends heading towards the season. Like I said, to give that 10 or 15% of snaps to help Barnett and Bennett help Barnett out and Graham. And I guess otherwise, I just want to see the offensive line and the running backs. I mean, last week the offensive line definitely seemed a lot more comfortable in the run game than week one. Miles Sanders popped off some good runs. Boston Scott looked fairly decent. So, I mean, I want to see that continued comfort on the offensive line, opening up holes, giving a guy like Miles Sanders a chance, because last week Miles Sanders was definitely looking like the running back we drafted and our running back of the future. And I want to see that more. And I think just week one of the preseason, I think it was just they had some issues. There was some comfort issues, getting used to the run again. It's easy to block a pass. It's blocked for passing, but it's a bit tougher to block for running, between a scenario where you're not tackling and a scenario where suddenly you're tackling and these guys are pushing on you as hard as they can. So I definitely like to see some more work there.
Yeah, I agree with the Miles Sanders point. He looked really good last week. And there, some continuity. That's my only issue when it comes to the offensive line is we haven't seen Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks. Who knows if hopefully he'll be able to play week one, but we don't know. Jason Kelsey. Or Jason Peters, they haven't been on the field together. Now, hopefully they got some work in with the Ravens this week. Again, the Ravens got a really good defensive line, got a really good defense in general. But hopefully they got some work in. Now, when it comes to the joint practices, the coaches prefer this over preseason games. And I think even the players prefer. Nobody wants to play 4 preseason games. Nobody wants to watch 4 preseason games. I mean, I watch it because it's football, but let's be real. The first preseason game and the fourth preseason game, nobody cares about. The second one, they care about a little bit more, and the third one used to be of vital importance. But again, a lot of starters don't play, especially for the Eagles. What do you think as another way for, it could be for the NFLPA, an NFLPA thing, or even the NFL thing, do away with 2 preseason games, but make these joint practices televised. They were talking about it on WIP today. Like, if you kind of televise these, do like a mini Hard Knocks type of thing in each city where you televise joint practices, that can take place of a preseason game. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely not a bad idea. I mean, you get your kick of football, and it's not like you're not watching these pointless preseason games where you're watching like half the guys aren't even going to be on the team. And you're just like, oh, well, I don't really care. I'm trying to evaluate players, but you can't really evaluate them. I think those joint practices give a way better kind of visualization of evaluating a player versus these preseason games where the pace of the game, like you spoke to earlier, is just not even the same, not even close. Malcolm Jenkins probably looked 10 times better because the pace is so different. You got a bunch of rookies and sophomores all fighting for roster spots, moving at a slower pace, not really giving it necessarily their all. So I'd definitely be down for that. And I've heard of a lot of ideas being tossed around, like having just 2 preseason games, having the 18-game season, but you can't use all the starters. Like, I've heard all the ideas tossed around, and I'm really interested to see. Before you
continue with that, if they were to go 18 games and then the players only play 16, do you know how that will affect fantasy football and betting?
That's one way to look at it. I mean, I wasn't thinking about it from a fantasy perspective, but yeah, you got to plan so I do have to have a couple of these pointless motherfuckers on my team. So that's basically what you're kind of saying.
Pretty much.
So, but yeah, I mean, I've heard all the ideas, and obviously the NFLPA with this agreement, something's going to change. Something has to change for the preseason. So, I mean, what they choose to do, as long as you don't take away the football and make us wait longer, as fans, we're going to be happy. But as long as you don't give us a bunch of pointless trash like we have now, we're going to be just as happy. Just don't make us wait longer.
I agree. And you brought up that the possible work stoppage in a couple of years. I would not be happy. When we had that work stoppage, what was it, in 2011-ish, I think? A little bit before, I think it was 2011. It was whenever the Eagles had the dream team, because they signed Nnamdi Asomugha the same year. That better not. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if there was a work stoppage. I need football.
Agreed.
You have
absolutely.
We need football. All right.
We definitely do.
All right. So quickly for me, when it comes, again, you're right when it comes to the linebackers. I want to see how the defense does if Lamar Jackson's going to play, how it does against a quarterback of his caliber in terms of, and I'm not talking about talent. I'm just talking about he's a different quarterback. He runs first, and he's got speed. He put on a couple moves against the Green Bay Packers. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. He scored a touchdown. Granted, it was called back because of a block, I think, blocking the back. But he is Michael Vick. But Michael Vick says he's faster. That Lamar Jackson is faster. I loved the Lamar Jackson in college at Louisville, and I said that he was going to be really good coming out. And Shane was like, "Give me a break." And then, of course, he becomes the starter for the Baltimore Ravens. And then that's another bet or another thing that Shane says that I was right on, because I'm right on a lot of things apparently. But but yeah, I just want to see. I want to continue to see. I also want to see Sidney Jones, Avonte Maddox, and Rasul Douglas. I want to see these guys out there and kind of take their claim to the top three cornerback spots. Even though I think Ronald Darby's pretty much going to be a starter when he's good to go.
The amount of money you're paying, you got to get that guy. It's an expensive bench player.
Exactly. And then offensively, if we see Carson Wentz, which I don't think we will, just keep him healthy, please. I need him healthy September 8th, 1 p.m. at the Link against the Redskins.
And this ain't about fantasy. We need this man healthy.
If we have a Super Bowl. We have a Super Bowl caliber team, and Nate Sudfeld's not taking us to the Super Bowl. Josh McCown's not taking us to the Super Bowl. I mean, we can't get Nick Foles because he's in Jacksonville, so we need Wentz to stay 100% healthy.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, first, just one more thing that I just want to throw out there. Elliot Shore-Park's tweet today about Rasul Douglas. I don't know if you saw it, but it said if Rasul Douglas isn't a starter this season, he should ask for a trade. First of all, the idea behind the tweet is completely stupid, but I'm just happy that my boy is showing up. I'm just happy that my boy is showing up because I've been preaching for him all offseason. I would be some disappointed if he completely crashed. It
wouldn't surprise me if Joe Douglas calls Howie. They have that pipeline pretty much from Philly to East in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So it wouldn't shock me, but I think he's going to see the field. We don't know what's up. Jalen Mills is going to start the year on PUP. He's going to start the year on PUP. He's not going to be back.
Happily, he can.
Yeah, he's not going to be back until at least week 6. So Sidney Jones, Avonte Maddox, Rasul Douglas, Ronald Darby, and a lot of teams like to play 4 wide receiver sets, so they're all going to see the field. So I don't think Rasul Douglas is going to have any, and I think they actually have more confidence in him now. Like last year and the year before, it felt like they didn't want to put him on the field, but every time he was on the field, he made a play. So they have to find a way to get him on the field, and he put in the work. You saw how his body changed from last year to this year. He got rid, as you mentioned, and a couple months back, he got rid of baby fat, and he looks like a legit starting, defensive player in the NFL.
Agreed. If the DBs stay healthy, I think we have one of the stronger units. And last year we fielded 13 DBs.
13 wasn't it 13 corners?
13 corners, yeah. Not if you DBs, want to add in the DBs.
Safeties, that's corners, man. 13 different starting corners. That's a ridiculous number.
If we can stay healthy and you have those 4 names playing for you, that's...
And they're young.
They're young. They're still molding. Like Rasul Douglas, they're all just... Sidney Jones is just getting his confidence. It can be a dangerous group of corners.
Definitely can be. All right, before we get out of here, I have a fantasy draft on Sunday, a league that I won the championship in. So I'm looking to defend my title. Give me one. If you don't have it off the top of your head, I understand. Give me one sleeper guy from any team that other people might not be thinking of, and somebody that I can steal in the second half of the draft.
Oof, second half. Oh, buddy,
or even okay. Give me anybody.
I mean, I'm insanely high on David Montgomery, but I know he's starting to go higher and higher. So by the time your draft hits, he's probably going to go high. And man, they love him.
Even with Tariq Cohen, they like him?
Oh, yeah. Well, Matt Nagy just said the other day that he felt like they used Cohen too much last year. He already had, that was already a light workload. That man ran for only 400 yards. So, I mean, I guess for me, I think take your pick of over the Panthers receivers. I love DJ Moore, but there's a ton of people who love Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel's
Not a
going to
big
be the
Curtis
one who
Samuel
goes
fan.
latest. Curtis Samuel will go later. So, I mean, I guess call it like it is, whatever you want to do.
And
But
Cam is healthy now, right? His arm is back. He's healthy.
that's what they've been saying. And then I saw Curtis Samuel, but they're saying like he's almost unguardable. But, I mean, this is preseason, and this is
Exactly.
also like practicing against your own guys. So
Exactly.
calm down. But
All right. Well, thanks for the help again. And then our Always Next Year podcast draft, the draft lottery is this weekend, and then our draft is going to be next weekend. So I won't be able to ask you for some help then because we're going to be competing against each other. All right. So for before we head out, this segment was brought to you by Just Food Catering Services. Treat yourself. Take it home. You can go visit our friend Rob over at 4920 Old York Road in Buckingham, PA at 18912, or you can give him a call, 215-794-3663. Connor's, you can reach Connor on Twitter at ConnorTN if you have any fantasy football questions. I'm sure he wouldn't mind giving you a hand. You can reach me at LJHarrell54. That's LJHarrell54. Or you can reach us at the Always Next Year podcast, Twitter at ANY podcast. And go Birds. Eagles, Ravens this week. Finish off the preseason next week at the Jets. So, hey, maybe Joe Douglas and Howie Roseman will talk trade next week. Who knows? But for Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for listening to the Kelly Green Hour. And we'll see you, or you'll listen to us next week here on the Kelly Green Hour here on the Always Next Year podcast.
Pushed down for so long, let the sun be our home, and come steal your bread. Keep your fighting dogs strong, fighting for morsels, killed by their morals. Day after day, our family's fearful. You asked for war, we've been pushed too far.